Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, let's get going. Then I want to start with Catch the Rabbit, because this is the story that in many ways set things in motion for you. I know you wrote it in Bosnian, and then at some point you decided to translate it into English yourself, which you later said you wouldn't recommend. So, since it's such a weird, difficult process to be going through as a writer, I was wondering what it was about this story in particular, the story in Catch the Rabbit, that made you feel like that needed to get out there, to be in the world, to be heard, to be felt, well beyond the Balkans.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here. I'm always happy to come to Romania, but I'm especially happy to be here just as a listener. And so you've done an amazing job with this conference, especially the volunteers. They're like amazing. I'm really impressed. So thank you. So yeah, I can't think of anything worse than translating yourself. It's like looking at a really unflattering photo of yourself that you cannot change. And you really learn a lot about yourself as a writer, about where you could get better. But the thing is, translators and publishers are not exactly lining up for women writers from Bosnia. And our own literary scene is still deeply patriarchal. Like, our idea of a writer is a 70-year-old straight guy sitting on top of a mountain, giving speeches to everyone. So I kind of realized if I wait for my own literary scene to read me, recognize me, help me, I might as well die, because they prefer women writers who are dead, and the only ones that, for example, just to give you an example, growing up, there were no women writers in our textbooks. I didn't know that women could be writers. I really didn't. I didn't know that this could be my profession until I was in my 20s. So I realized either I do this on my own, or it doesn't happen. And so I was living in Barcelona, and I had all these friends that could not read anything that I wrote. And my idea was I just wanted to get this published in Catalan. That was all I wanted, just to have it out in Catalan, because all my friends speak Catalan and then they can read me. And I set out to find a Catalan publisher. There was one that I really loved. But of course, nobody reads Bosnian. So there's this catch-22 situation where in order to be translated, you need to submit a translation. They need to see something in English or Spanish, but how are you going to have that unless you already have the contract to be translated, right? So I basically sat down and I was like, okay, I'm just going to do it myself. It's not going to be very good, but just to have something to pitch. And then my Catalan publisher said, they liked the book, and they said, who's your agent? And I said, my what? Like, do you have an agent? I was like, no.
Myself?
I mean, there are no literary agents in Bosnia. That it almost sounds as magical as like the ring bearer, like literary agent. Like, what is that? And they asked me, would you like one? It's like, do I have to pay them? Because I have no money. I was like, no, it doesn't work like that. I was like, okay, I guess. And that's how it started. That's how, sometimes you, instead of waiting for those in power to grant you a seat at the table, you have to leave the room and, make another table. That's like the only way it can happen. And so that's how it happened for me. Yeah.
Well, it turns out it was a very good, sturdy table, because your translation ended up being published internationally. The story was very well received. It got translated into several other languages, Romanian included. And audiences that connected with it, or like the audiences that seemed to connect with it most, were in German-speaking countries, Germany, Austria, Switzerland. So much so that at some point you ended up moving to Berlin. Tell me a bit about the Lana that arrived in Berlin? What was your vision of the city, of what your life, your work might unfold like there?
I mean, I was madly in love with Berlin. I mean, there's a huge, just to give you context, there's a huge Yugoslav diaspora living in these countries. It's not like Germans suddenly discovered me. It's like it was just a lot of readership, ex-Yugoslav readership living in German-speaking countries. And so I first got the DAD scholarship, which was a one-year fellowship in Berlin, everything covered. It was like a dream come true, basically, because I was at that point in my life where I had no idea what to do and where to go. And this just kind of landed in my inbox, and I thought, that's it, this is it. And I remember the train arriving at the station, and everybody's always talking about like how Berlin looks, I don't know, grim or harsh, and I come from a former socialist country, so to me, I see beauty in this. I could never really relate to Paris, Vienna. Like I could see the appeal, but there was something about these cities that made me feel like an imposter. I feel like I need wounded stories and places that have been through things, and then I feel like I'm at home. And so I fell in love with it. I'm the most, I think, diverse group of people that I've ever met. I met there. I lived in Neukölln, which is a very diverse neighborhood in Berlin, and I was just mesmerized by it. And I felt like, wow, they actually like me. They're inviting me to all these readings, festivals, in Switzerland, in Austria, like almost every town or city has like a Literaturhaus or like some sort of literary event. And I thought this could be home. I even started learning German, which
Should we switch to German now?
no, please don't. But yeah, I do feel like I was betraying a long line of partisan women in my history, partisan fighters. But yeah, I just really felt like it's a diverse place. It's a place where you can be free, or I had this idea of free, and I thought I had arrived home. Yeah, but little did she know.
Little did she know. Well, she knows where this is going because, full disclaimer, Lana, you shared some notes with us ahead of this conversation, some thoughts you'd put together on our theme. And I want to read a little bit from those notes back to you.
Okay.
Because in the notes, you describe this dream that you just described as well. You describe this feeling that you have arrived, that you're welcome, that you are read. But you also write something else. Blue-eyed pensioners smiled in the darkness of my audience, nodding their gray heads softly to every word that came out of my mouth. I gave them my nightmares, the beast that devoured my country, a place that no longer exists. And they loved me for it. It calmed them that the monster was finally somewhere else, and they could look away from their own not-so-distant nightmare. They could forget about their grandparents, perhaps, who were just doing their jobs, ratting out their neighbors to the Gestapo, managing the gas chambers, or maybe just ironing the uniforms. I made them forget all about it for at least that one evening when we would discuss the scary, savage Balkans, laugh at my commie grandma, and tear up for the lost brother in the book. There's a lot in there. But let me just start with this. Well, there was a lot more in those notes.
This is such a Debbie Downer. I hope you, after this, you have like something like a comedian or like what. So
we actually agreed that if this doesn't go well, we'll just do a dance at the end.
Yeah,
so
we have prepared something.
Okay.
What do you mean if? We agreed. Sorry.
No dance. This is gonna go well. Right. So we were talking about this dream, but clearly the dream at some point started feeling very uncomfortable. So I'm wondering, when did that happen, and how are you making sense of it as you were still promoting the book, engaging with readers, being invited?
So yeah, I mean, just to give the audience the whole picture, if that exists. So I wrote an article for The Guardian, which was about how, because of where I'm from, experiencing Bosnia, Islamophobia, the genocide of Bosnian Muslims, I know where certain discourses can lead, because it starts with language. People who have not been through these kind of horrors, they always expect it to start with like a big thing, a big bang, it's like a Hollywood movie, like aliens landing. Like, no, it starts with little things. It starts with language, like little differences that then become bigger and bigger and bigger, and then start feeding a certain myth that is later used to justify terrible war crimes. And I noticed what was happening in Germany was starting to feel a lot like home. There was mass censorship of any pro-Palestinian voices. And I understood why that was so, given German history. But there was also something else. There was something very paranoid, very Islamophobic, a creation of a new monster. And I felt what they're doing, they're selling it to us as this big atonement for something that can never be atoned, right? They can never wipe it out. And instead, it's trying to find a way to get rid of Muslims, and to paint this picture of, immigrants are bad and this is the way, this is the perfect way. Finally, we have found a way to get rid of them, to silence them, to be very violent towards them. And to me, there was just this blatant hypocrisy in this. And so I wrote an article about this, because what was happening was everybody was being censored. Things were, you cannot imagine that time, like readings canceled, plays canceled, sports people canceled over an Instagram post. A lot of my Jewish friends were fired because they were very critical of what the Israeli government was doing. And it just turned into this avalanche of like hysteria, paranoia. And I just, I wrote about it. And then some well-meaning friends texted me like, hey, you might not know this, but you can't talk about this in Germany, And these were like radical leftists, artists who talk about everything, who are like famous for, being very progressive, and their work is described as like cutting edge and risky. They're like, you can't talk. I was like, what do you mean? Do you know where I'm from? Like, what do you mean I can't talk about this? I'm going to talk about whatever the hell I want to talk about. This is not right. And I feel like this is heading towards a genocide. And the answer was like, no, you cannot say that word. You cannot use that word. And it just reminded me of the same genocide deniers in Bosnia and Serbia, who still exist to this day. And overnight, everything changed for me. Everything. My career just ended. And I was lucky because I do not own property in Germany. I do not have kids. I do not have, an office job. I have a European passport, so I'm not a victim in any way, shape, or form. But I could see this complete shift, just because I said, I think this is wrong. I think these are people. I think it's not okay for the biggest magazine in Germany to call a whole people human animals. And Berlin has the biggest Palestinian population in Europe. So this is not right. This is just, we have to be better than this, because I know where this leads. So yeah, things got, yeah, they did not like me after that. And what was interesting for me is you invited me here and you're paying me to talk about war, to talk about Muslim kids being slaughtered, and to tell you how that is bad. What were you thinking that I would be doing? So the idea was pigeonhole you into this, part of the literary scene, stay in your corner, talk about this, and we will, exoticize the hell out of you. Like I had this one event where they played Goran Bregovic after, like I was coming on stage. I was like, what is happening? Because, Bosnian author. So you stay there with, Cevapi and Bregovic and Kusturica and like chickens running on the stage. And yeah, but these are big, big people topics. We don't talk about this.
And we have our own big people to be
Exactly.
talking about this.
Yeah. So yeah, it was just it was really funny to me. I mean, it was just how quickly it changed. I decided to walk away from my German publisher. We had a contract for my next book, which was not yet written. But they kind of had this whole proclamation of we stand with Israel unequivocally, and I just felt like, all right, that's your right, but I don't want to stay with this publishing house. So in order to punish me, they pulled my two of my previous books out of print. They canceled the residency I had in Austria coming up. A reading was canceled without even telling me. Like on the day of the reading, I found out that I don't have a reading. Of course, my name was dragged in the media. All of that was really horrible. But yeah, I guess it's not new to me, So yeah.
I know you touched upon this briefly, but I know you've repeatedly said in many other conversations that you don't necessarily want to paint yourself as the victim in all of this, because you realize that there were other victims in the story, and in Gaza specifically, but also in Berlin among your international friends. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
I mean, I think it was the worst with my Arab friends because most of them are on very fragile visa, situations. Germans have this thing called a fictitious certificate, which is very strange, that allows people to stay in Germany and I don't know, work. I don't know how. So they couldn't, but these were people who would not even say anything, because this is why, for me, it was easy to speak because what do I have to lose? Like career in Germany or whatever, boo-hoo, but these people can lose their whole livelihood. So it made sense for me that people like me should speak up, but their apartments were raided. I have a friend who went home one day after work and found that his keys didn't work because the police had gone in, raided the whole place, changed the locks. There was a lot of my Jewish friends were dragged in the media, and there was this weird thing of you could see how I feel like German police officers and these journalists were enjoying it in a weird way. Like, finally, we get to do this. Finally, we get to flag the bad Jews in this country, because it just circled, this philo-Semitism that circled back into anti-Semitism. So, like, a lot of my Jewish friends fired, their names destroyed in the media. Some of them left, a lot of them left. So to me, they're the real victims in this situation. Or I have, for example, one of my friends, he edited a beautiful anthology of Arabic poets in Europe. That's it, 35 poets. I don't know how many translators worked on the book. He happens to be Palestinian, but the book is not about Palestine. It's poetry in Arabic, written by, Europeans. And his event was just canceled. It was just canceled overnight. Another friend whom you might know, Adania Shibli, who wrote the beautiful novel called A Minor Detail, won a huge prize at Frankfurt Book Fair. And they just emailed her telling her, we cannot give you this prize, we can mail it to you, but we cannot have the ceremony. Why? Because she's Palestinian. So it was just this, and it's documented. You can find it online. There's this project called Strike Germany with all the documented cases of censorship. These are hundreds of cases. And most of the people canceled are Arab people, Jewish people, non-German people. It was just bizarre. So to me, knowing what they have been through, I don't feel like, I'm here, it's, I think it's difficult for them to understand that there's a world outside of Germany, like there's literature outside of Germany, because it is the biggest literary market in Europe. We tend to forget that. But they really think that you only matter as a writer if you're translated into German. So I think my move to not be published by them kind of shocked them. They expect a certain kind of gratitude from us. Thank you. And I will stay silent in my corner and be just grateful that the big guy has published my book. Yeah.
When you got disinvited from the festival in Austria, you wrote a pretty direct reply that you then posted online. And I want to unpack some of what's in that reply as well.
Okay.
I keep quoting you to you because you keep
really
saying interesting
strange,
things. You wrote to them, the team behind the festival, while I am aware of the fact that the funding you receive within the system you inhabit must have made you forgetful of what art really is about, I still want to remind you that you are not literature. Your money is not literature. As Fischer, the publisher that Lana's advertised with, is not literature. And as you just said, Germany is not literature. And this begs the very obvious question, what is literature to you?
I was very angry at the time. And I think they underestimated, what it is when you make a Balkan woman angry. Yeah, I feel like the things that they loved me for before,
Turn back against them.
exactly, or yeah. So yeah, what I didn't like was the hypocrisy. If somebody has said, you know what, we disagree with you, we don't want you here, I could at least respect that. But this was all, well, emails. Maybe because this is what angered me, and I just felt like these people should be put in their place by the so-called small language authors. And I think to me the question is always, it's not about being, it's about doing. Like, instead of what literature is, to ask the question of what literature does. And if we are going to separate it from humanity, from being human, from what it means to be human, that then it has no meaning or sense or point anymore, because it comes from human beings. We have done so much, especially the modern Western philosophy and thought. We've put so much work into separating art from the artist. We say it with pride. This is a work of art. It should be, we should just focus on it. And to some extent, I can see why that is important. But I also feel like it has been used to just hide a lot of bullshit. And to make us forget that we are still bodies existing in a context. And we experience art as these bodies existing in context, and art does not grow in a vacuum. And so to me, to forget about the world, because all these people, well-meaning people, told me, focus on your writing, focus on your book, don't talk about this. This to me made zero sense, because I felt if I am oblivious and blind to the suffering of these people, then I render all of my work meaningless, because my work is about saying this is a human being. You know, this Muslim girl that grew up next to me had her name changed, her brother was killed. This is a human being. So how can I write about that, but then not look at this? And I think it's a matter of distance. I think if there was a child here on this stage and somebody walked in, and I'm sorry, shot the child in the face, and we just kept talking, you would say that we are psychopaths. And there's something wrong with this festival. If that child is on the street, slightly different. If that child is in a different country, no longer relevant. So it's a matter of distance, really. It's just convenient not to care, right? To me, I feel that art, when it's divorced from humanity, means nothing. And I'm very aware of this fact because, and I wrote to you about this, the reason I'm here right now is because an 11-year-old boy survived a concentration camp in 1941. And that was my grandpa. And then after that, he survived typhoid fever. So he's like, he was a survivor. And then he survived my grandma. But, yeah. But you know, this is very, to me, and this was a fascist concentration camp in Croatia, which in 1941 was a fascist puppet state. And so I'm very aware of the privilege that is just to exist. And so to not use that to talk about, you know, what it means to exist as a body in this world, a political body, what a privilege it is to say that you don't care about politics, what a privilege it is to write non-political work, which I feel like is the most political of all work. These are just things that are ingrained in my existence. And so, yeah, I'm not going to have some German dude tell me what I can and cannot do with it.
Speaking of bodies that experience literature, art, but it also needs to sustain themselves. I recently read a report by the Performing Arts Coalition that showed that almost 40% of artists in Europe do decide not to express their political views. But what stuck with me beyond that, even because we've already addressed that, was that they also hide details about their origin, their age, their family, so as not to be recognized as an other and to lose funding and projects and ultimately stability in their lives. I know you mentioned you came from a place of privilege in what you did, but was that ever a thought that you may never be able to go back to literature as you see it, to this way of making sense of the world and also making a living off of it?
I think because when I started, I remember what it's like to be a nobody. So I had published 4 books before Catch the Rabbit in my country. And when I didn't know that I could be a writer professionally, it was just something I did on the side. And so I've been in that place, and I could still write, and there were still readers. And then I had, you know, the whole the book, the prize, etc. And then everything was nice for a while. But since I never started out thinking I want a career, since I didn't know that was an option, I don't do this for that reason. I feel that it would be much harder for me to betray certain things that I believe in and then show up the next day and write. What would I write about? You know, you write a sentence and there's a character in the sentence, and that character is a human being. Like, how do you show up for that character? I felt like it wasn't anything heroic to me. It's just like I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to do this job that way. I wouldn't be able to do this anymore. So I wasn't really afraid of that because I've been a waitress, I've been a secretary, I've like worked, I'll figure it out. And again, there's other, literature. Again, Germany is not literature. To me, it's much bigger and wider than that. So I wasn't really afraid, which again was a privilege, and as I said, I didn't have a job to lose. I don't have kids that go to school in Berlin, etc. um so yeah, I didn't have that, because to me the fear is becoming morally vacant, and then having my work become irrelevant in that case. Because think about literature, a story is me telling you, this is how I survived. Does this ring true for you? Does this tell you anything? Or this is how this person survived? Anything, divorce, a bad day, depression, a war. It's a great act of empathy to read. You're spending hours looking at something through somebody else's mind. You're saying, I'm able to imagine something other than myself. That is reading. And so if you cannot do that in your life, it becomes, it just doesn't, for me, make sense at all. Yes, sorry. I was just going on about.
That was great. I want to go back to the anger that you
Yes.
just talked about. Because that's also something you told us, Christy and I, the people sliding in your DMs. When we did a call before the conference, you told us that you wrote down these notes that I just quoted, but they're just so angry. And I remember thinking, well, yeah, obviously. Like, I mean, there's plenty of reasons to be angry. Look at the world. I don't see how that's a problem.
Yeah, just two of you are so nice and smiling people, they're like, hi, we want to invite you to this conference, hope. And then, I mean, look at them. And then my notes are like, this angry woman is going to come on stage just to yell at everyone.
Well, you haven't yelled yet.
Yeah, yet.
But that got me
I've yelled
thinking.
at Chris, I think. Yeah, last night because I was hungry. Yeah. Sorry.
It was not on stage. You didn't see it. It didn't happen. But it got me thinking about whether there is a place for anger in hope. If there is place for outrage, for seething rage in hope. What do you think?
Well, I mean, many amazing people over the last couple of days have talked about how hope has to be active. It has to be, for me, hope has to be resistance. And I think the same goes for anger. It cannot just feed on itself. It has to turn into meaningful action. It has to move you. And I think it's okay to be angry about injustices. It is our body experiencing the injustices. And anger is actually, I think Scarlett can help here because she's a psychotherapist, but I think anger is actually a second-hand emotion. It actually, what lies beneath anger is sadness. And then sadness, which cannot be expressed, can turn to anger. So we can be in despair, but we have to turn it into action. Otherwise, it starts to eat away at you. To me, it can be a great source of action, and I've seen it. I've said so many bad things about Germany, but there are so many wonderful people activists who organized, who did meaningful things, who, we were fundraising for families that were trying to leave Gaza but couldn't cross the Egyptian border without paying like $20,000-$30,000 or something. So there were like all these fundraisers buying eSIMs to send to people when the lines were cut. Like the flotilla, a lot of those activists came from Germany. And this was like anger that had to go somewhere, and not to go towards more violence, towards hurting, but towards reconstructing, reconnecting. This, I think, is where anger can become useful. Yeah. But I think we need more. Somebody said, I'm stealing this from someone, but somebody said we need more angry women in the world because there's so much self-help bullshit on like how to calm down. The meditations, the breathing techniques, I'm calm. That is not the problem. I think sometimes we have to also like not to allow it to hurt ourselves or others, but like to be like, this is not okay. Yeah.
That actually reminds me of an interview I listened to recently with Rebecca Solnit, where she said that one of the reasons we've ended up where we are now with fascism on the rise and genocidal wars and all the injustice in the world, not that the world was ever just for everyone, but still, is that for a very long time, the narrative on any other side than the far right has been be calm, be polite, bring fact-based, reasonable arguments.
Which is the colonizer's discourse. We are the civilized ones. You are the savages that cannot talk and, behave. And then the problem is not the content of the conversation, it's the fact that you are not behaving. This is what I experienced in Germany, was you are making a scene. And we don't like that here. I'm sorry I interrupted you. This was a angry woman making a scene, but it's being more obsessed with the way things are said, with keeping things quiet. But when you keep things quiet, who benefits from it? The ones that are already privileged, So yeah, I feel like we need. That doesn't mean that we cannot have, a conversation. It's just not to be kind of enslaved by this idea of decency, which I think is just a deeply colonial idea.
Yeah. And I mean, eventually it ends up protecting the people who are committing the injustice. But I always try to, and maybe you can tell me how you feel about this, because this is also a narrative that I've bought into. Be calm, be reasonable. Don't tell Donald Trump or Călin Georgescu or whoever that he's a fascist to his face because you're going to burn the bridge. And the thing is that behind that person, that really bad person, there's also many other real people. And I think Elena did a beautiful job of showing that. Very real people with very real needs and pains that have not been listened to, that need to feel represented. And this weird, annoying fascist is sort of the embodiment of their frustration. So that's where I was struggling a bit with anger. Like, does that also burn the bridge to those people behind the embodiment of their anger?
I just feel like they don't spend as much time thinking about how not to offend us. And if a bomb fell on this conference right now, none of us would be thinking about how do we stay calm and civilized in this moment, right? So to me, it's not about, it doesn't mean that you have to be offensive. It doesn't mean that, you can still argue. But I just feel like we should stop worrying about, offending the very people who are oppressing the rest of the world, because they don't worry about this. So this is if somebody, again, I'm ready to not be liked. You just have to accept that, and that's fine, you know. But I just feel like it's a matter of it's not my house being bombed, so I get to be the calm and collected one. I think it was Arundhati Roy who said, "How do you go on a hunger strike if you're already hungry?" You know, how do you do peaceful resistance if you're cut off from the world? This does not mean that, you know, violence is the answer. It's just action. So anger turned into just bitching on social media. No, that's not what I'm. But action turned into some sort of tangible action. This is where I think it can actually build bridges. And then you're showing those people who are disenfranchised, we are on your side. We are not blind. We see it. We see you. You know, it's basically, to me, it's just that. And there are things that we should be angry about in the world. So get angry, Alina.
Right now? Let's do a quick vibe check because we're almost on time.
Yeah.
Yesterday in all of the keynotes, basically everyone was talking about this constant pendulation between feeling desperate, but also trying to do something, anything, to make this world a little bit better. Where are you on the dismay, hope axis right now? And what role is writing playing into any of that?
It made me actually, the whole theme of the conference made me think of something James Baldwin said, which is, I've been enraged by the world, but I have not been in despair, because you cannot tell the children that there is no hope. So going back to the anger, and so despair again is a very passive feeling, but it's valid to feel it about the state of the world. It's valid to have those emotions. But I think for me, the most important lesson has been find your people. Find your people. You're not alone. The world will make you feel like you're alone. You're not alone. And also the world will make you feel like, unless you're like partnered with this one soulmate, you're alone. And you mean, no, you're not alone. Find your community, find your people, and the despair will feel lighter. It will dissipate. It will, it will become easier, an easier burden to carry. I feel like this is true of almost any emotion. Some of them are too big for one body to hold, and we need to share it. And this is why we need other people. For me, that is number one. And writing is a part of that. Writing is, I could be writing a diary and then destroying it if it was just about me expressing myself. But writing is hope that somebody on the other side will read this and connect to it on some level, that some connection will be established. Because writing is also something that exists within a community. We started telling stories in order to survive. We started telling stories, let me tell you a story about this predator that is chasing a little boy, so you don't think about going out, in the dark. It was literally a way, an evolutionary thing we developed to survive, so that you don't have to experience all the pain in the world to understand it. You can read about it, and you can also feel like somebody else has experienced something that you are going through. This is what writing is to me. And if I ever stop writing for people, I might as well just not write at all. That's how I feel about it.
So find your people. and
Find
keep
your
writing.
people. Yeah, they're everywhere.
There's like about 500 of them in this room right
Yes.
now.
Yes.
Well, that was beautiful.
That
Thank
was
you,
also
Lana.
beautiful, Alina. Thank you.
I feel very lucky to have had this conversation with you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're getting a standing ovation.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to have this as my ringtone. You know, you wake up in the morning and like people applauding me.
There's no snooze when that happens. Okay, I could live with that, yeah.